Can you hear me? Thanks for having me. So I'm just going to jump right in. Let me do a time check. This will all be proper. Okay. So I am involved in a lot of different mapping projects. I'll highlight a few more straightforward mapping things that I've done, and then I'm going to jump into some other stuff that might not properly be called mapping, but I'm going to call it that anyway. So I've used maps in work related to affordable housing. This is just a basic example that I think is really useful in terms of comparing two different kinds of housing situations as the public housing was being torn down in Chicago. And so what Tim talked about, as he said, was a more like literal kind of version of mapping. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about conceptual mapping. I'm going to speak about 3 projects that I've been involved with, and then 3 projects briefly that I just think are inspiring and interesting. So to be clear, when I'm talking about social movements, I mean something that's quite broad, and there isn't a great definition of it, but I do mean an organized effort by a significant number of people to change or to resist change in some major aspect of or aspects of society. So the people gathered here represent a social movement, perhaps several, probably several. But and NASCO itself isn't a social movement, but as an organization and as sort of a device, NASCO allows us to see ourselves in relationship to one another. And so I think NASCO is really interesting. Thanks NASCO for that. Thanks for getting us all together. But and thanks for having me. But I'm also excited to be here at NASCO because I just recently moved into a housing cooperative, but I'm not going to talk about that at all. And so my relatively new status as a cooperative member is not mine here. So let me talk about social movement mapping. What I'm talking about here is more about the language and ideas of mapping, and using those to collaboratively research and document and present in a useful manner the complex webs of people and activities that make up a social movement. So we're trying to envision ourselves, envision our shape. To envision people working together in a coordinated fashion is difficult. Finding a way to see and envision the shape and scope of social movements is a huge challenge for anyone who sees themselves as a part of that movement and who wants to be strategic in that environment. So for my purposes, mapping becomes a metaphor for the practice of envisioning, connecting, and sharing. And to be clear, there are many ways to do this kind of movement mapping. There are events, charts, documentaries, directories, maps, and I'll show you several of those, because I don't want you to leave and say, well, I don't really